Yo, what up, guys? So you know how that new book came out, Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon by James Hibberd. There's a lot of good information in there. I'm not going to go over everything, but over the next few days, I'm going to make a bunch of these casual little videos just to point out some of the best takeaways from the book. Like I said, there's a lot of good stuff. Today, I'm going to start pretty light. This one's pretty easy, but just, there will be spoilers for The Winds of Winter, technically. Alright, so, the main question in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire is, who is Jon Snow's mother? So as you probably know, George R.R. Martin had an interview with David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, I think that's their names, and he had that famously asked them that question, who is Jon Snow's mother? From George R.R. Martin, quote, they said they read the books. I wanted to see if they had really read the books and how much they had paid attention. So then David Benioff says, we were weirdly prepared for that question. We had discussed that the day before. We had just started to talk about it and came up with our theory, which just happened to be right. So, right away, we know that they answered the question and they got it right. George R. Martin then says, they knew the answer, which was good. Then in this book, David Benioff says, after we got the Jon Snow mother question right, he gave us the backing to try and go out there and sell it. Now, there are a lot of people who still believe that N plus A equals J, or Ned plus Ashara equals Jon. I don't speak to that many people on Instagram, only a handful of people. And some of my good friends still believe that Ned plus Ashara equals Jon, but it's just not true. So here's another quote from George R. R. Martin. Basically he said, they were very persuasive. They loved the books and wanted to adapt the books to a different medium, not change them or make it their own. I hate that in Hollywood. When I go in pitching a book and meet with writers and they're like, here's my take on it. I don't want your take on it. Don't reimagine it. Don't make it your own. Just adapt it. So George R. R. Martin goes on to say, I told him, I want a faithful adaptation. I don't want it to be one of those things where you take a title and write a whole new story. So he goes on to say how he's a producer and he got to write some of the scripts. Okay. So I want to know once and for all, if any of you N plus A equals Jers out there, does this end it for you? Before I go though, I'll mention some other stuff from the books that I've mentioned in other videos, but here are sort of my top 4 in terms of who is Jon Snow's mother, clues from the books. First of all, you have at least 4 people in the books who think that they know who Jon Snow's mother is. Cersei, Edric, Mira, and Barristan the Bold. So it's a main question of the story. Who is Jon Snow's mother? And we have some clues. The first is the appearance clue. So you got all the Starks for the most part, they look like the Tullys. They have that sort of like auburnish hair or tint to their hair. They look like their mother, Lady Catelyn Stark. Except Arya and Jon. It's noted that Arya and Jon look like each other. Arya looks like Ned, which implies that Jon looks like Ned. There is actually also direct confirmation that Jon looks like Ned, at least in the books. In the show, Beric like, hey, you don't look like your father. No, that's non-canon. Anyway, so Arya and Jon look like each other. Arya and Jon both look like Ned, and it's also mentioned that Arya looks like Lyanna. So the missing link there is that Jon looks like Lyanna. Alright, so number 3. This one's pretty cool. So this comes from it's Ned Stark's very first chapter in book 1. So he's down in the crypts with his boy, Bobby B, King Robert Baratheon, and they're talking about Lord Robin Arryn, or Robin Arryn, not Lord Robin Arryn, the little old pesky Robin Arryn, whether he was going to be fostered with Stannis or with Tywin, right? So then one of them says, I can't recall who it is, one of them says, the son is not the father. Which is pretty interesting, because he's just talking about how little Robin Arryn, he's not like Jon Arryn. Jon Arryn's a pretty badass, right? However, there's actually a clue there. The son is not the father. Robin Arryn is not Jon Arryn's son. Robin Arryn, most likely, is Littlefinger's son, but it gets better than that. This whole conversation is being said in front of Lyanna's tomb. And Ned is speaking about his nephew's welfare. So explicitly he's referring to Robin Arryn, but it's a subtle clue about his nephew, Jon Snow. The son is not the father. Jon Snow is not Ned Stark's son. And last but not least, this chapter is so good. A Clash of Kings, Jon 6. Oh, it is so good. This is the one where Jon captures Ygritte, right? So in this chapter, Jon is hiking up to sneak up on Ygritte and her party before killing them. He's with this guy called Stone Snake, who is a really good climber. And it's a pretty risky climb. Jon Snow's not a climber per se, and he's with this guy who's a really good climber. And then Stone Snake says to him, the mountain is your mother. Cling to her. Let me get the direct quote. The mountain is your mother. Cling to her. Press your face up against her teats and she won't drop you. Jon had made a joke of it, saying how he'd always wondered who his mother was, but never thought to find her in the Frostfangs. So that sort of sets up this chapter as a chapter about who is Jon Snow's true mother. So then Jon goes on to capture Ygritte. She then tells him the Bael the Bard story, which is a song that her mother sang to her. It's also a song that parallels Rhaegar kidnapping Lyanna to a T. Well, not to a T, but there are a lot of parallels. Bael was a bard, Rhaegar was a bard. They both died in fords, the Ruby Ford and the Frozen Ford. The girl that Bale allegedly kidnapped is called the Rose of Winterfell. She loved the blue winter rose, and Lyanna loved the blue winter rose of Winterfell. So there are a lot of parallels, right? And as you guys know, I love the first and last lines of chapters. Often, they're just really, really important, and there's clues in them. So this is a chapter where Jon thinks to himself, I always wondered who my mother was. We got the story about Bale the Bard, which is very similar to Rhaegar and Lyanna, and then here's the very last line to that chapter. Alright, so it's not the very last line of the chapter I just looked, it's the last couple lines of that chapter. So Jon's about to swing that sword and take off Ygritte's head, and he thinks to himself, he could give her a quick, clean death at least. He was his father's son. Wasn't he? Wasn't he? Two wasn't he's. And then he ends up letting her go. But yeah, at the end of the day, George R.R. Martin asked David Benioff and David Weiss, something like that. He asked them, do you know who Jon Snow's mother is? And that was a deal breaker. They answered, they got it right. And George R.R. Martin, especially at the time, he wanted them to adapt his story to film. He didn't want them to change it. This is fundamental to the story. It's not something that would be changed. So, N plus A equals J. It makes a lot of sense in different ways. It's pretty cool, and there are some benefits to it, but it's not true. Jon Snow is a son of ice and fire.
Until the end of my days. Robert's rebellion was built on a lie.